So, season 12. Honestly, I am very conflicted on how I feel about the season. This was the final season that Hillenburg had any involvement in during its production. And funnily enough, this and season 13 were the point where I felt like I was starting to lose interest in the show. I still look back fondly at the older seasons, minus 6 and 7. 12 and onward pretty much left no impact on me. And it wouldn't be until season 13 where I finally threw in the towel. It was mainly Nickelodeon oversaturating the franchise that really threw me over the edge. But after finishing the rest of season 12, I'm just left feeling conflicted on my thoughts. You had some pretty great and creative episodes, some that could rival some of the other modern episodes from this show. But then you had episodes that either irked or bored me out of my mind. And then you had the rest of the episodes which just did nothing. I'm not kidding when I say after watching the middle of the road episodes from this season, I completely forgot about them. Maybe it's because I was catching up with it, but season 11 was also bonkers with its episode quality, and yet I still remember most of the episodes from that season. This results in a season where I'm not sure whether to say I like it or hate it. While its best and worst episodes are definitely better than season 11's, more of the problems from that season are present here and onward. Like, the references to older episodes are more prevalent than ever, which, like I said last time, could be desperate if given to the wrong hands. Also, the wacky and silly facial expressions, which I praised back in season 10, has kind of lost its charm due to some of the newer episodes overdoing it nowadays. Still, I take them over the hyper-realistic facial expressions, since the animators get to have a bit more fun making the characters look cartoony. Speaking of whom, I've noticed that some of the newer episodes have been trying to embrace the cartoony side, more so than the previous seasons. I mean, you have one episode where SpongeBob and Patrick bring Chum to life to impersonate Mr. Krabs, and then you have an episode where SpongeBob helps out at a farm. And yet that's somehow the more bizarre episode. You see where I'm getting at here? The quality and ideas behind season 12 have been bonkers. And yet that comes at the cost of more forgettable or bad episodes from this season. In fact, any dishonorable mentions could have easily gotten the bottom 5 spot, and I'll explain the deciding factor when we get to that. But I think I've gone on long enough. Let's just get started to the main subject of the video, the top 5 best and worst of season 12. You all know the rules by this point. These are all based off of my opinions, and you may disagree with me on some of them. And I'm also sticking with the alternating method of the previous few countdowns. But anyways, with no more further delaying, let's get started. Patrick's Tantrum. In this episode, Krabs comes up with the idea to ring a bell to attract in customers. However, Patrick throws a huge tantrum, harassing everyone around him. It turns out it's because every time Patrick hears a bell ring, it reminds him of how it meant it was his bath time as a kid. SpongeBob then proceeds to stop all bells from ringing to prevent Patrick from having any more tantrums, while Krabs uses this to have Patrick fight against a wrestler. This episode is so dumb. How would you like if we have an episode where Patrick just erratically harasses everybody, and then Krabs proceeds to capitalize on it? If you like that kind of episode, then this is certainly for you. They don't even do anything fun or unique with this kind of idea. Instead of doing something like with what Krusty Crushers did, the wrestler just stands no chance against Patrick when he's on a tantrum. Not to mention there's also this B-plot where SpongeBob trying to stop all the bells from ringing, which isn't funny. It's repetitive and even annoying at times. All of this is bad enough, but honestly, I could have cut the episode a bit of slack and just called it a by-the-numbers bad and annoying episode. So what made me decide to put this on the worst list? Simple. The ending is awful. The episode established how the bell brought back terrible memories for Patrick of bath time. Except they completely go back on that statement when his parents come over to congratulate him for the wrestling match. And it turns out they didn't ring a bell to signify bath time? What? No, it turns out they squeezed a rubber ducky. Okay, putting aside how this contradicts so many past episodes, this ending basically nullifies everything that happened throughout this episode. And as a bigger slap in the face, When Patrick squeezes the rubber ducky, he goes into that same tantrum. I understand Patrick is supposed to be an idiot, but seriously? You went on a whole tantrum about bells for no good reason? And yet now that you know that it was the rubber ducky that caused the tantrums, now you all of a sudden get tantrums from the rubber duckies? It just makes no goddamn sense. And it drags down what was already a bad episode. Like I said, I could have easily put any other episode in this spot, but Patrick's tantrum seals its fate with its dumb ending.
What happened? I just became rich!
Stormy Weather. As the storm clouds start to leave Bikini Bottom, one of them leaves behind their offspring and SpongeBob decides to take it in. However, it wreaks some havoc in Bikini Bottom and their credible weatherman, Dale Doubler, decides to take the cloud to have it disposed of to keep his credibility. Like I said before, the later episodes aren't afraid to embrace its cartoony side, allowing them to think outside the box with some creative concepts for episodes. This is one of them. The idea of SpongeBob becoming friends with a rain cloud is pretty creative, and I don't think I've ever seen a concept like that before, especially since I've seen media depict rain clouds as evil and mean. So concept-wise, I have to give this episode a lot of credit. And thankfully, the execution is also really good. The antics between SpongeBob and Drizzle are charming and humorous, and the climax of the episode is really engaging. Dale Doubler made for a decent antagonist for this episode, trying to get rid of the rain cloud to keep his credibility. He's a pretty good love-to-hate kind of character, and they do sprinkle in some humorous moments during this battle. Maybe it went a bit far when Drizzle flew into Dale Doubler. I don't know whether to call that vor, considering he's just, well, air. But outside of that, it's a really great episode. It has a unique concept and does justice with it.
A clam eating a telephone. A fur chandelier. A lamp. A shoe factory. A continental breakfast. A chicken.
The Nitwitting. Episode follows SpongeBob taking Patrick to empty-headed society. SpongeBob chooses to join club to see how it feels. However, society performs civic duty by making messy in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob kicked out of the club for questioning choices, but SpongeBob has no brain and brainstem breaks, making him stupider. This episode is not brainy. All is a bunch of stupid people causing havoc everywhere, and it's not funny. See stuff like characters saying dumb things.
These are the minutes. 1 minute, 12 minutes. Wait a minute. Give me a minute.
SpongeBob drinking up people's drool.
Why, you said drink.
Lemonade? Stuffing themselves inside trash cans. Literally no creative things. This all just baby things. We don't like using that word, but this what is. Sometimes if done good, it's stupid could be funny, but this no good. It's just stupid.
Is he okay?
No, I think he's completely lost it.
Try saying I'm ready.
John Hetty, Dime Betty.
The Ghost of Plankton. After watching a ghost movie, Plankton comes up with the idea to turn into a ghost to sneak through the safe and steal the formula. But because he's a ghost, his hands go through the formula. The Flying Dutchman comes in to mock his attempts to grab the formula, but it turns out all Plankton needs is to study the ways of scaring to gain the ability to hold things up. You could probably predict some of the outcomes of this episode, but much like Father Time from Fairly OddParents, the rest of the episode is able to salvage itself in spite of that big issue. For this episode, it's the character dynamic between Plankton and the Flying Dutchman. Two of my favorite characters of the entire show interacting with each other. Like, it's a match made in heaven. And I'm happy to say that it did not disappoint. Plankton having to learn the ways of scaring people as a ghost, it can get pretty funny and even creative in some moments. And yeah, while you can figure out the outcome of the episode, it doesn't just stop there. We then see this little scene of Plankton going to his own funeral, and they somehow manage to make it funny without it feeling tasteless. Take that, Loud House.
It's okay.
Yeesh. This is the worst funeral of mine I've ever been to.
So yeah, in spite of its glaring issue, it's still a really entertaining episode.
Shh! Someone's coming. Watch me scare this dummy real good.
Plankton's old chum. In this episode, Plankton's chum reaches its expiration date, and now he has to dispose of it before the health inspector comes to the restaurant. However, every nook and cranny he's gone to is completely full, so he enlists the help of SpongeBob to dispose of it by making him believe it's for a holiday. Yet again, we have an episode that markets itself as a Christmas episode, yet it barely even qualifies as one. Granted, it's at least a bit more related to it than Goons on the Moon, but at the cost of being much, much worse. Why? Because it's a gross out episode. Chum was already disgusting enough, but the writers thought, how can we make it more gross? How about we make it expire? Like, I still cannot believe that the Bikini Bottomites are actually embracing this. And that's a huge chunk of the humor of this episode. Like, in order for Plankton to not get a fine, he has to eat all the chum. It is karmically justified, sure, but ugh. I'd say the only real joke related to this that kinda got a chuckle out of me was with Squidward.
What is today?
Why? It's Chum Day!
Then I haven't missed it. Wait a minute. Chum Day? That's disgusting!
Oh, I see. He thought they were talking about on that show.
Whoa! Arlene, shut up. So, overall, yeah, it's a pretty bad episode. And it might actually be considered the worst Christmas-themed episode from the show, because it barely qualifies as one on top of its gross-out factor.
And lo, there was Chum. A food that turned from revolting to festive by magical thinking. And the goodwill of Chum clogged the hearts of fish kind and ushered in a new...
Handemonium. After losing an arm wrestling match with Mr. Krabs, Plankton gets the idea to bring his giant hand on the chum bucket to life and use it against Krabs. After winning the match and he proceeds to use the hand to steal the formula, it starts to work against Plankton and goes on a rampage. So it's up to him along with SpongeBob to stop the hand. Here's another episode with such a silly concept that actually does a really good job with it. Except this time it's actually more ridiculous. And I mean in a good way. Plankton bringing the giant fist on the chum bucket alive? Who thinks of that? In the wrong hands, this would have been a stupid episode. But the writers did this weird concept justice. It would seem like another scheme to get the Krabby Patty formula, but the origin doesn't really come from that. Sure, it seems a bit more redundant, but I don't mind it. And it's only when the hand turns on Plankton where the episode really kicks into high gear. The different ways SpongeBob and Plankton try to fight against this hand is really fun and engaging. And I especially love this one.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
You do.
Thanks for the pants, Hans.
Yes, they enlist Hans to stop the glove. That is ingenious. And the fight between him and the glove really had me at the edge of my seat. Like, seriously, how do they do it?
Oh, look, they're playing rock, paper, scissors! 1, 2, 3.
Yeah! Nothing beats scissors.
Oh, except rock.
Yeah, overall, it's a fun episode. These are the kinds of episodes I want to see in the show. Ones that have fun with its concept, without it feeling dumbed down or wasted. If there's ever a time where I do come around to watching seasons 13 and onward, I would hope for episodes like this.
Any less words? just one.
SpongeBob's bad habit. In this episode, SpongeBob starts having this weird obsession with biting his nails. He tries to resist biting his and other people's nails, and Sandy and Patrick try to help. Seriously? Can I just point out this episode came before Handemonium? And yet this episode feels like it would fit right at home at season 6 and 7. This episode is basically a retread of The Splinter, an episode that literally nobody likes. And surprise, surprise, it's just as awful. There's no wit, charm, intrigue, it's literally just SpongeBob biting his own nails and everyone trying to prevent him from doing that. That's it. That's the entire episode. I could talk about the unfunny and inappropriate jokes, or that dumb ending that gives the one from Patrick's Tantrum a run for its money. But I don't want to do that. It really isn't worth it. For a while, this used to be my least favorite episode of the season. But then I came across another episode that was worse in my opinion. But even with that, this episode is still terrible. And I will never understand why it was greenlit in the first place.
Tell me he ain't doing what I think he's doing.
Oh, he's good.
SpongeBob, that's just plain wrong.
Dirty Bubble returns. The Dirty Bubble is finally captured and sentenced to prison. And after his sentence is up, he comes out looking clean. He's given a warning to stay out of filth. This is because when his body's dirty, so is his mind. With the help of SpongeBob, he tries to stay away from dirt, but most of the attempts end up in failure. Here's an episode that surprised me with how good it was. After being dormant for 7 years, only being relegated to cameos, the Dirty Bubble makes his return in his own episode. And I had to say, I like the whole idea behind this. Him being reformed and cleaned after spending time in prison, and him having to avoid filth and dirt in order to stay clean. It's an idea that actually fits the character pretty well. And it's interesting how SpongeBob is willing to help the nemesis of his favorite superheroes, trying to make sure he stays clean in order to not turn evil. It's an interesting dilemma that makes this episode feel fresh. It doesn't feel like they shoved it in for the sake of fan service and left it at that. They actually took the time to think of something creative for the character. Also, I'm a sucker for supervillain stereotypes, so the moments where the Dirty Bubble was doing villainous deeds did have my attention. All in all, I think this episode did a great job bringing back this character. It's funny, clever, and engaging. If only Ernest and Tim were still here, then there's a chance it would have been perfect.
You want me clean, but I ain't willing. I gotta be me, and me is the villain.
The Krusty Slammer. Plankton is finally sentenced to prison, but it's completely full, meaning Plankton is set free. But Mr. Krabs offers to turn the Krusty Krab into a prison to make a quick buck and give Plankton his bad karma. However, the officer sends in more prisoners to guard, and Krabs decides to turn the Krusty Krab into an actual prison. But it soon starts to get out of hand once Plankton's sentence is up. Oh jeez, this one. Okay, if I have to give this episode some credit, I do see an interesting idea buried underneath this. But it's the execution that really drags this down for me. It's not uncommon we see Mr. Krabs turn his restaurant into something like a hotel or an ice rink. But this is one of the first cases where it's not just the money that entices him to turn this into a prison, as it also gives him the opportunity to give Plankton his justified karma on top of that. And things only really escalate when he's given more prisoners to keep an eye on. The problem is they don't really do anything else all that interesting with this concept. I would have much preferred it if they did something like what Jailbreak did. Sure, it would have risked entering retread territory, but with good writing, it wouldn't be a problem. That's the thing that really bothers me about this episode. The writing. The beginning left a bad impression as the police officer is just okay with letting Plankton get off scot-free just because the prison was full. I mean, I guess the crime Plankton committed that got him sent to prison wasn't as severe, but given his criminal record over the past few years, it makes no sense. It just screams convenient and contrived. And like I said, they don't really do anything all that interesting with the concept of Mr. Krabs turning the Krusty Krab into a prison. They just play the same old repetitive jokes of Mr. Krabs torturing Plankton, the prisoners harassing most of the customers, and SpongeBob treating the prisoners with utmost respect. As in luxury. In fact, it's when Plankton is finally released from his sentence that the episode completely derails, in my opinion. The point of a prison is to not just punish prisoners, but rehabilitate them. Give them a reason to change for the better. Whether it be through locking them away from the outside world, or being beaten down either figuratively or physically. That way they have a better understanding of the golden rule. But no, SpongeBob can't handle seeing prisoners, including the Tattletale Strangler, be tortured. At least when he helped out the Dirty Bubble, it made sense. He idolized him as much as he feared him. What excuse does he have in this episode? I'm also not surprised that Krabs is more concerned about the cost of making the prison humane. But after seeing the toll it causes on his restaurant and customers, he just immediately releases the prisoners, no questions asked. That's probably the biggest fuck-up he's ever made since he sold SpongeBob in Born Again Krabs. Now, thankfully, he's given his comeuppance, but even then, the build-up to it feels contrived. On top of that, they play the joke of how the prisoners love SpongeBob and the way he's treated them, which I don't buy it at all. Even by the logic of this show, it makes zero sense. You're telling me characters like Sticky Fins or the Tattletale Strangler actually love SpongeBob even after all he's put them through in the past? I'm sorry, that's the fakest shit in the world. Bottom line, the episode takes the interesting concept of turning the Krusty Krab into a prison, and they completely botched it up. It's not funny, the characters feel out of line, the narrative behind it feels incredibly contrived. It's just a mess all throughout. While it's nowhere near as bad as Call the Cops, it still managed to leave me feeling annoyed, resulting in what is my pick for the worst episode of Season 12.
The formula! It's so close! I can almost touch it! No!
Good times. Good times.
Karen's baby. In this episode, Karen orders a baby of her own, and once the baby arrives, she's thrilled about becoming a mother, while Plankton was unenthused. He wants nothing to do with it and even mocks it at times. But as their kid grows older, it becomes more rebellious and Karen isn't having it. So she tells Plankton to talk with their kid and knocks some sense into him. Plankton then encourages his son's rebellious side and even suggests running away. But when Karen finds out, she demands Plankton to find their son and bring him home. Fan service at its finest. Seriously, I can't tell you how long I've been waiting for them to do this episode idea. And I am so glad it turned out this fantastic. Right from the get-go, I like the way that Karen and Plankton have a child. Karen ordered one online for a stork to deliver, and it took 9 months for the thing to be built and delivered. Cheeky. And I like the way they designed their child Chip, starting out as a calculator during his infant and toddler years, before it transforms into a design that's closer to Karen when he's older. I'll admit, the aging bit is a bit faster than what I was anticipating, and of course they had the stereotypical teenage phase jokes.
I told Chip that game was too dangerous, and do you know what he said to me?
And...
But it didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. One other thing I do really like about Chip is that he starts off as a silent character, with most of his emotions being conveyed through his expressions and movement. Also, there's some cute little moments with him being robotic, like the way Karen manages to make him stop crying, or the way he teases a swear word at Karen. I also like the little development Plankton has with Chip later on in the episode. He starts off opposed to the idea of having a child, especially since Karen did this without his consent. And then you have this one moment where Plankton actually encourages Chip's rebellious side. It doesn't really feel too out of character for someone like Plankton to do that.
Your mother stopped your game, even though you were crushing it? Your mother clearly doesn't get you, man. But I have the perfect solution to your problem. Run away.
And it's only when Chip saves him when he's in danger that he finally starts to appreciate his son. It's a nice little moment. And it almost makes me wish Chip was just a regular on the show. Almost. Topped up with some really funny jokes, especially during this ending epilogue, where we see Chip at his new job as an ATM, and we see that he's picked up a bit from his father, as he ends up teasing Mr. Krabs with the money. That was a great way to cap off this episode. Overall, I have very little to complain about in regards to this episode, and most of it would either come down to nitpicks or overshadowed by the good stuff in this episode. In fact, well, yeah, I could say this now. This might just be the best Plankton episode since Plankton's Army. Obviously, it doesn't top that episode for me, but it was pretty close, and I was not expecting that at all. I knew it was going to be good, maybe even great. But for what it does well, it earns the title of my favorite episode of Modern SpongeBob, as well as my pick for the best episode of Season 12.
Come on, son. Let your old man buy you a quart of oil. Woohoo! Yes!
Sorry, Dad. I'd love to, but I'm leaving for college.
I went to college.
So those are my favorite and least favorite episodes of Season 12. Now, normally this is the part in the video where I talk about moving on to the next season, and how I hope that maybe Season 13 can surprise me after leaving a bad first impression on me. Since I haven't seen every episode of that season, and what I have seen ranges from just okay to pretty awful. In fact, in my Season 11 video, I said I was going to wait until it was on Paramount Plus, and not long after, they put it on it. So now I have the means with catching up to it. Except... Okay, remember how I said I was starting to lose interest in the show following the oversaturation? Well, I was willing to give the show one last chance, since the show was entering its 25th anniversary, and I looked back on the first 3 seasons and redid my pre-movie video. But then, this happened.
Stranger? It's the Cyclops!
Yep, right back at rock bottom. I watched this movie on Netflix during my spare time and I hated it so much. And after taking my time to really think about it, I decided, f it, I'm done giving this show chances. Hell, I'm still in debates on whether to see In Search for SpongeBob. As for what this means for my Season 13 video, honestly, I'm not sure what to do. I've expressed before how I was starting to lose interest in the show, and Saving Bikini Bottom is pretty much emblematic of the problems with modern SpongeBob. The reasonings behind the spin-off titles are either non-existent or pathetic. They're trying way too hard to appeal to veteran fans, and the characters we grew up loving have pretty much been annihilated, flanderizing them to a point that they no longer feel the same. It's clear that Nickelodeon is trying to aim the show way more towards the child demographic, and yet at the same time they're trying desperately to keep their old audience, except in most cases it just ends up failing. It made me question at one point on whether I was getting too old for this. Even my dad lectured me on my obsession with the show, and after rewatching the older episodes, I realized we were both wrong. The first 3 seasons still hold up today. Granted, it's not flawless. There's a reason why I included a worst list when I did my pre-movie review. But when they got it right. And I still stand by my opinions on the other seasons, because at least they tried something. And I've grown more of an appreciation toward those seasons -6 and 7 because of that. But after Hillenburg's passing, it felt like the show was trying to be as safe as possible. While there were some good episodes from Season 12, from this season onwards, I felt nothing watching SpongeBob. I don't know, maybe I could be in the wrong. In fact, I want to leave it up to you guys. Do you think I should watch Season 13? Do you think I'll find something good out of it, or is it just not worth my time? Let me know down in the comment section below. Oh, and be sure to also tell me what your favorite and least favorite episodes of Season 12 are. And until next time, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in my next countdown.